The distinct opportunity in this particular session is going to be able to talk to 3 industry experts. That actually doesn't include me. I'm just the conduit and the messenger. That's kind of my unique ability in life. But we're going to have Terry Aberhart up here. We're going to have Matt Gosling up here. We're going to have Elston Solberg. And I would say outside of Neil Wiens, the inventor, and a few other people in the network, these guys contain the most knowledge about the product and the practices that we're going to be talking about. Just to talk about Aberhart Ag a little bit. We got started in 2015, and I'll let you guys talk a little bit more about the history of Bio-sul from your point of view, but the practice actually got started in 2013 out in Strathmore, Alberta, surrounding the compost pad where Neil Wiens originally invented the product, and essentially he had been composting in the feedlots of Alberta for quite a while and saw the value of moving nutrients farther out through the process of composting. And he became that guy that would take almost anything that people were throwing away and he tried to make something of value of it. And the innovative thing that he did is he took compost, he blended with elemental sulfur and had this product created called Bio-sul. And so they were playing with it in Strathmore for a couple of years, providing it for your customer base. We'll look at some really intriguing data. We've come to some really interesting milestones where this product, I think, is becoming a lot more mainstream and accepted, and a lot more people are going to look at implementing it because of where we've got to. And there's thousands of data points from your customers. But they started in 2013. It was really through Elston and Matt that Terry got involved with the product. And we started in the spring of 2015. We're the first folks in Saskatchewan to put some on the family farm there. And I remember going out there and we had the spreader and the pile, and we weren't sure exactly all about the product, nature of the product. And the spreading was kind of a little bit of a tricky thing. We had parts off and pieces all over, and we were talking to Matt about which pieces to leave on and take off. And learning to handle the product is a little bit of a learning curve. And that's why ultimately we ended up setting up the Trusted Applicator Network that's been working really well to get the product to the market. But now we're coming full circle, and we'll talk to Terry about that, where we've had this product on the farm for 5 years, and that's my impression is a lot of people in the industry be, more or less holding their breath to see, is this product going to do what the claims have been put forth, and now we're rounding the corner on that, so I'm hoping, we'll have different conversations being past that, and so we're starting to look at reapplication. Another milestone this fall for us was having applied the 1 millionth acre, and somebody asked me the other day, why are you so excited, or why are you passionate about doing what you do? And for us, it's a very simple formula that we could sell to any producer at the farm gate. We're going to sell you 2 to 3 times the amount of nutrient because it's half to 2/3 of the price. Because of slow release, we could put down really high rates of this sulfur product that's going to release in conjunction with good growing conditions via Mother Nature. It takes proper temperature, moisture, and oxygen to release Bio-sul into the soil profile, right, through biological activity. And we're essentially oversupplying sulfur to all the crops in the farmer's rotation for every year. We're needing more and more sulfur in a 5-year rotation via the higher yields from the crops. And it makes a lot of sense logistically to get high salt index, bulky, manufactured fertilizers out of your blend. So just on those key points, we could talk about price, we could talk about logistics, we could talk about the finer points of agronomy, but the real why is that we're doing something that you've heard at, skirted around, talked about, all these important things, getting to the consumer and all that. This is something that's from the circular economy. It's truly, we could have produce that's produced with Bio-sul that's back in the stores that gets thrown out and put back into Bio-sul. Think about that one after a late Tuesday night. It's like a time loop. It just keeps coming around. So it's truly one of the best high volume, real world examples of the circular economy that, all things being equal, shouldn't we be taking a close look at doing as part of the industry. So I know if anybody asks me or why about the product, or Terry about the why of the product, that's really ultimately where we land, is that sustainability piece. We've been really proud to bring it to the market. So we started out in 2015. We had no idea how we were going to get it to the market. Ultimately, we found ourselves acting more and more like a classic, distributorship model. We have over 40 retailers in Saskatchewan and Manitoba helping us bring it to the market. And I think something that's been undeniable, and you'll hear more about it too here today, the producers and the agronomists and the retailers that have been involved that got it early on, and many of them applied much of their farm very early on, they're kind of starting to come around here again. It's the people that are using the product that's really made the difference. It's kind of hard to deny the value of the product if you take a look at who's using it across Western Canada, the who's who, right? A lot of top producers got it very quickly, a lot of top agronomists, and a lot of forward-thinking retailers. So that's kind of what we do. That's the main, pitch on the product. But what I really wanted to do today was give everybody an opportunity to talk to these three brains, and we'll talk a little bit about the Bio-sul, but I'm sure the conversation will expand. I want to give you guys lots of opportunity for interaction. So first guy up here I'll call is Matt Gosling from Premium Ag. I wouldn't even know how to list all the things you're involved with. First of all, family man, obviously. But Premium Ag, Agronomy Company, Core Ag, a retail company, Replenish, fertilizer company. What else are you involved with, Matt?
We market all the compost for the city of Calgary.
Okay. Is that a little check box?
Not all of it, but
yeah.
60% of it anyways. Cool facility.
Wow. So how much volume is that?
26-ish thousand tons. They put through 40,000 a year through that facility.
So is that going on farmers' fields, a couple tons per acre? Wow.
Landfill diversion again.
Yeah. And so what is that doing for those guys that have that opportunity?
Well, it's a nutrient biological supplement. So it's all the green bin material collected, and then there's some of the CalGrow, the dried CalGrow compost is put in there, so it gives us a nutrient value that equates to a very unique situation and an opportunity for growers to put a build rate down of PK. It's got some sulfur, it's got biology, it's got microbes.
Yeah, sometimes I think we don't stress enough the differences with Bio-sul and the compost. You might as well have a seat there and we'll get started. And Terry and Elston, you might as well come up, but I know how this is going to go. We got some really interesting talkers on here, so it's not going to take us long to get into it. For you started out using Tiger 90 with your customers after you saw the bottleneck with AMS, and that was, if I'm not mistaken, 2013 when you switched from Tiger 90 to Bio-sul. So really one of the main differences between Bio-sul and manufactured elemental sulfur obviously is the compost. What difference does that make for you in your thinking in the product?
Well, we first spread it in July of 2013 and a Bio-sul, and we've basically taken collectively between this whole Bio-sul experience, I think, and Tiger's credit as well, and Keg River, like sulfur is sulfur is sulfur. The salt index is a very pertinent talking point, and I think a very valid talking point right now. It's not something that we'll ever see right in front of us, but it's kind of a generational thing. More and more and more fertilizer, I don't think, is going to equate very well for our soils. So we've taken collectively as an industry, and I think we've turned sulfur, the perception of it as being more than just a micronutrient. The more nitrogen we take up, the more sulfur we need, and it is crop specific. The salt index was the big thing, and we've always broken things down to a cost per pound. So typically ammonium sulfate is going to be a 40-cent a pound of actual sulfur. Tiger in our geography is going to be about 20 to 24 cents per pound of actual sulfur. And in our geography, for the most part, the Bio-sul is going to be less applied. It's the easy button kind of philosophy. And so for 6 years, Elston and Brent Tarasoff really kind of mentored me in my young agronomy career, and sulfur was one of the biggest impacts that I immediately made in my advice to our farms, to the farm clients that we were working with. So my quick start personality kicked in, and I bought a spreader without any elemental sulfur to spread. But it was a really good business plan as far as the spreading opportunity went, because I had to spread ammonium sulfate every single year. So we used Tiger for 3 years. We were, I think, inadvertently one of the biggest customers for Tiger at the time through all of our clients. And I don't know if we got the graphs to kind of show this, but the evidence, you cannot argue with the data, so to speak. And like the gentleman in Tiger said yesterday, very good presentation, by the way, sulfur, the sulfur soil test, we've never really, it's really hard to put weight on that, but when we've got several thousand soil tests up there.
It hasn't just been bullshit since 2004.
I hate the acronym for
We just
Bio-sul.
want to make sure that this technical thing is correct. That's actually Bio-sul.
So for the first 6 years of my business, we were using very aggressive rates of ammonium sulfate on every single crop. And if it's high, ask why. If it's low, you know. So at a soil sulfur level of 20, that was kind of what Brent coached me with in his cross-referencing with all my notes, that you're basically empty. So we went to a 100-pound application of Tiger for 11, 12, and 13. Spooky, it worked. The numbers went up. There were 33, 30, and 46, and then we switched. So yes, there will be some carryover from Tiger influencing some of those Bio-sul numbers, but for 6 years now, 7 coming up, that's really hard to argue with. We're putting sulfur in the soil. And then the tissue test part of it, you got that one up? Yeah. So hard to read, but we got barley, canola, peas, wheat, and all of our histories when we started using each of the products, and you take a one-off glance at that, and there's a lot more green and yellow bars. So yellow is basically within range, red is deficient, and green is excessive. Excessive is not detrimental to any other issue or nutrient in the plant. So that's 3,400 sets of data right there.
And how many, these were 4,000 some here, data points on this one, I think. Eh?
Yeah, I didn't
Cumulatively,
add them up, but
you can see the clientele numbers going up here.
So, well, yeah, it's not just a canola thing either. I think the only thing that I would have challenged you in your presentation yesterday was, I think, peas, legumes, anything that nodule, the pea nitrogen uptake is 3.5 pounds per bushel. Not many people realize that that's more than canola. More nitrogen, more canola. We've seen really good responses in our peas, but the wheat proteins, it is, when you change a macronutrient pillar, you have to expect that you should probably change some of your other ones. So the nitrogen use efficiency is one of the biggest benefits. So we're seeing higher yields with the same amount of nitrogen, because that's typically not something that a bunch of growers are going to influence or drop. They're always scared to put down less nitrogen. So we're seeing more consistent protein in our wheats, and everybody says, well, does that mean my malt barley is going to get higher protein? No, it just means that we have to be super cognizant to be more aggressive, conservative, whichever way you want to look at, lowering our nitrogen application in our malt barley.
You guys got that? Okay, that's what we're going to do. Elston, where were you where were you 2004 to 2020? What happened?
Well, hang on, I got to turn on.
Yeah. Hey man, it's not too early for Christmas. I was going to catch you on that.
We wish you a Merry...
You kind of, hey, you could grow a beard to match the hair and you got something. To match your generosity.
I'm not going to sit on your knee and ask for a present for Christmas.
Even though the urge is almost overwhelming.
All right, so where was I in this period?
Yeah,
I started my elemental sulfur research in 1979, so that tells you how long I've been doing this. I've been a sulfur nut ever since, and at the end of the day, obviously, I'm a big believer in Bio-sul, but at the very end of the day, I'm an even bigger believer in sulfur in general. And the thing that I always say to growers is that every crop needs sulfur every year. That was actually a Tiger manifestation some years ago, and I was involved in some of that. And then they went to the 100-pound thing, which helped on the logistics side, and you can see some of the positive results that are up here. And I just think the overwhelming message that I can give everybody in this crowd is use sulfur every year, and even better yet, put down large amounts of sulfur every 3 to 6 years, hopefully in the Bio-sul form. But if you're also using Keg River, Tiger, Montana 90, all of those will work very much in your favor. And what we've learned over the last few years is relearned actually, some really simple stuff. When all plants have high levels of sulfur in them, those high levels of sulfur turn into molecules that are called phytoalexins or glutathione, and those are stress fighters. And when a plant is full of sulfate sulfur, what it does is immediately turns that sulfate sulfur back into some elemental sulfur, and that acts like a plant antibiotic. And so what you end up with, and if you think about that a little bit, what were the first antibiotics that humans started using based on? Sulfur molecules, still are, most of them. So you end up with a plant that's better balanced, as Matt said, with nitrogen. So you got, if you do your good job of your crop planting, you've got more yield, more quality, higher protein, except in malt barley, where you have to be mostly worried about nitrogen, and you can grow more yield and still have good proteins. What you end up with is a plant that sort of has multiple layers, multiple defense layers that fight off diseases and insects and all kinds of stuff. And so that's a really big deal. The first thing, we're looking at a data set here between these two. And if you can flip to the tissues, it's the biggest data set of on-farm, like this represents hundreds of thousands of acres. And it's one of the biggest data sets you'll ever see that clearly shows that the concept of elemental sulfur, be it Tiger 90 or Keg River or Bio-sul, it works. And what you're looking at here is the amount of sulfur that's in the plant and the shift from deficient to high. And you really can't overdo sulfur in plants. But what it doesn't show, and I'm sure Matt has the data, is the N-to-S ratio in the plant. And once we start zoning in our N-to-S ratio in plants, our ability to grow more crop per inch of crop available water per input goes up dramatically. And then the next challenge is to start nailing down the N-to-K ratio. And once you get those two ratios nailed down, man, you're off to the races. And some of you heard a bit of my talk yesterday with water use efficiency. The average for wheat is 7.5 bushels per inch of crop available water after the factory. When you get your N-to-S nailed down, when you get your N-to-K nailed down, you can start hitting 10s. And I'm not BSing. That's for real. And that's where a whole bunch of the future opportunity lies. So the one message from this panel, from me especially, is sulfur every crop every year. Yeah, some crops need more. If you're into a system where you're putting on large amounts every 3 to 6 years, you're on the way to success, even more success. And then the next challenge will be to moderate your potassium levels. And the beauty of putting on large amounts of elemental sulfur every few years is now you freed up tank space. You probably have a floater or somebody that has a floater that can help you on the potassium side, and now you can start locking down not only the N-to-S ratio, but the N-to-K ratio, and then it's like strap in, because you're going to be going for a really cool ride. And then the third ratio, and has nothing to do with sulfur, except it kind of has everything to do with sulfur, because you don't have sulfur in the program to set you up. You can't get the N-to-K thing done. And the third ratio is calcium to boron. And for those that were in the crowd yesterday, you'll know all the reasons why. The people that were here yesterday morning became smarter than 97% of the agronomists and farmers out there in less than an hour. And so if you can get those three ratios in place, that's pretty powerful. And sulfur is one of the best places to start. So I'm not quite sure if I answered your question, but if you guys think of the thousands of soil samples and the thousands of tissue samples up here, this is one of the largest data sets that deals with sulfur in maybe the planet, maybe the universe, I don't know. And I think it's pretty compelling. So for the doubters out there, the academics out there that keep cranking out the same old baloney, try some of this stuff. Big applications of elemental sulfur. It provides a great bridge strategy. It allows sulfur to become available for every crop every year. It's logistically sound. It's agronomically sound. It's an absolute no-brainer.
I got to get something off my chest. There's chunks in Bio-sul, like surprise, but it's less than 5%. You know how good farmers are at keeping records? Agronomists, I'm guilty. I forget every once in a while to put Bio-sul applied, blah, blah, blah. So we got to go and look. And that little signature, like it's really tough for me to walk between here and that door and find a couple of little pebbles. Yeah, they're going to be available when your grandchildren are farming, but it's literally 1% or less of the product. It can't get crushed. The other thing that really chaps me, well, outside of the competitor or the retails that don't think outside of the box, that collect a jar of it and collect all the stones, they take a lot of time to do that.
And then they put it in a glass of water and say it doesn't solubilize.
Well, no kidding.
Well, hello, elemental sulfur is not soluble.
It takes a lot. So one thing that I can very easily tabulate for you, Dan, is pH. Right. We have a very aggressive set of our application history of elemental sulfur, and some are coming on to their third application in 10 years or 12 or 16 years, however many are up there. We do not have a significant change in our pH. It takes, and I refer everybody to this PDF, guaranteed. If you type in tiger, sulfur, and scab for potatoes, they've got a very good 2-page PDF, and on the back it's got sand, silt, clay, and if you want to drop your pH from 8 to 6.5 on a clay soil, you need about 2,400 pounds of elemental sulfur. So it's going to take a long time, and all
we can provide that. By the way, we can supply that.
Yeah, all fertilizer. Well, and no kidding, because I've got some irrigation that where our water source is putting our pH from 7 to 8 within 5 years, and everybody's seen the pH graph at 8. Almost all of our nutrients outside of molly gets less available. So now I'm trying to get talking to growers in southern Alberta about sulfur burners.
Right on. So Terry, you're going to account for your activities and your whereabouts from 2004 to 2020 in an entertaining way for the audience here, succinct, but at the same time humorous and
probably
poignant.
not as entertaining. But first of all, I think there's a lot of electricity going on in Elston's brain there. I think that's what's powering the Christmas lights. And I have to shamefully admit I was not in Elston's presentation yesterday, so I'm still part of the 3%, I guess. So take what I say with a grain of salt. But that being said, I guess for me as a farmer and an agronomist as well, we started working with elemental sulfur quite early on and on our farm and with our clients. And I think shamefully there's still an amazing amount of misinformation about elemental sulfur, period. And from an agronomic standpoint, when you have, sulfur is only one of the only nutrients that we can apply in large amounts ahead of time, that we don't have elemental sulfur, that we can apply in large amounts ahead of time, that we don't have the risk of, leaching and loss, and essentially, will release itself along with, the yield potential, moisture and humidity and all those, temperature, all those wonderful things. So I think for me where things really clicked probably in the middle of my agronomy career, we were really starting to focus on higher efficiency products, whether that was things like using Jumpstart or S15 and those kind of products, combination products. They were really good for variable rate programs because you kind of kill a couple birds with one stone in one tank and those kind of things. But they were all also costing more. And I think where it really started to click in for me is when we went on a tour to Argentina. And one of the challenges there is they have 1 year rental agreements, and most of the growers there are not investing into the land into the long term because they don't know if they're going to have it. And one of the hugest concerns of the government there was they're seeing declining phosphorus levels and whatnot in the soil, and they're really, really concerned about eventually being able to, their yields are going to start going backwards. And so I came back kind of with a different outlook from that trip and started to think that, we need to think more about the longer term. And I mean, we're all fairly aware that in most cases, none of us are putting on enough phosphorus or potassium or sulfur to keep up with nutrient removal. And here in Canada, we have a lot larger soil bank to begin with, so we can behave poorly for a lot longer. It's kind of like a nice inheritance from your parents or something, but it's going to catch up to us eventually. And so we started looking at, hey, like, how do we actually get the right amount of nutrients in our soil and in the most effective way? And what we also saw, is working with our clients in our own farm. I'm a bit of a tissue test addict. It's got a bit of a problem with that, but I like tissue testing things multiple times through the year and all kinds of stuff. And we started to see that even with like really fairly aggressive sulfur programs where we're combining S15 and ammonium sulfate and up to 30, 35 pounds of sulfur, we'd be running out of sulfur in our tissue tests in mid-season or later season on those years where you have really good yield potential. And as a grower, there's only so many times you have the opportunity to hit those really big yields. And so now, are you prepared when you see that to go, find a spreader or get some liquid sulfur and put it on the crop to try to capture those few times you have to put some extra yield in the bin and capture that revenue when you have the opportunity to do that? And anywhere we have an elemental program, it's just the levels were there. And so those are some of the things that I think made a lot of sense for us and still do. And what we've seen in the whole time that we've been working on the Bio-sul program now, we've just seen oodles and oodles of tissue tests every year on our own farm and with our other clients that are on the same kind of program where our levels are good. We've got no issues. And when those years come along where you have the ability to grow really good crops, it's just there and something you don't have to worry about. So that's one variable we can take out of the equation and then spend more time managing other things that are higher risk and need more attention, whether it's nitrogen or phosphorus or your fungicide application or whatever it may be. So it's my little, maybe not quite as long of a rant as these guys, but my little rant.
Actually, it was as long. Yeah. So your perception is shorter. Like time actually contracts when you're talking, but for the rest of us, it was expanding.
Okay, you brothers. Hey, just a couple things.
I was elongating when you're talking, that's just.
Dan, a couple things popped into my head while Matt and Terry were speaking after I went on my rant. And, I really like the sulfur signature thing. As simple and as goofy as it might seem, it's pretty powerful. One of the things that we need to realize too is that when we stage this product Bio-sul in the field, it then has to go through a spin spreader that's cranking at 900 to 1,000 RPM, and so those little nuggets you see in the pile get obliterated when they come flying out of that spreader. So that's something to think about. And so the signature that you might anticipate in the pile is quite a different signature that comes out of the spin spreader. Oh yeah, that's some research that I did. I actually dreamt this up in the shower one day, and
you dream everything in the shower.
Yeah, honest to God. And then the second or third piece is we hear a lot of stuff about, why would you put disease on your field and why would you put cigarette butts in your field and all that nonsense. Club root, yeah. So here's the thing. The product has to be analyzed on a regular basis to make sure there's no diseases, no heavy metals, none of that sort of stuff, no cigarette butts. It has to be analyzed on a regular basis, and it has to be analyzed for assurance of the 70% sulfur content. So that whole part of the equation is a bunch of malarkey. I'm on the Joe Biden tour. What's his thing? Stop the malarkey. I guess I'm on his tour. Yeah. So there's that. Then the other one is, well, why would you want to put on a product that creates acid? Well, there's lots of good reasons. If you got high pH soils, you want to create acid. That's a good thing. But here's the other part of the story that they don't tell you, is that elemental sulfur is biological acid. It's drip, drip, drip. It's slow. It's biological. It's Mother Nature. Every other fertilizer you folks manage is chemical acid except for potash. And actually ammonium sulfate is more acidulating on a pound per pound basis than is elemental sulfur, except it all happens instantly. And elemental sulfur happens drip, drip, drip. And I could get into a big long harangue about all of that as well. And then the last thing, and I'll let somebody else talk. I've looked at the Mulder chart 1,437 times in my career. And do you know, guess which nutrient isn't on the Mulder chart? Sulfur. Mike Dolinsky had to point that out to me. So that might tell you a little bit about my IQ. So what does that mean? That means that sulfur enhances the utilization of every other nutrient we try to manage. And then I guess the last part, now I'm turning into Mike Dolinsky. If you've got a very well-balanced soil, what do you think the soil health is going to be compared to a soil that's out of balance? We just came out of a soil health session. If you're managing your nutrients so that your crops are optimizing yields and sucking CO2 and linking them into the soil and all that, what do you think what do you think your soil health is going to be? Better in a balanced soil or better in an unbalanced soil? I think that's a no-brainer. And that's all I got right now.
Mike's got a sick sense of humor because he asked me the same question. He was just waiting. Oh, I don't know. Sulfur. One thing that we don't talk, I don't think, enough on, Dan, is the biology. Like, so, and I think it kind of hit us in fall of 14 because we were applying the product in the first year it was made, and we were having product quality issues. Like, the process was new and rough and not nearly as refined as it is today. So we had an old new leader spreader, and it had 2 inches of clearance for about 4 feet, and we did get a bunch of lumps and bumps and plugs and blah blah blah. And about a week into spreading in 14, I phoned up Neil and I said, "What the heck did you do to the product?" And he said, "Nothing." And then it was just that awkward kind of couple of seconds where you could tell that he was thinking about, well, why is the product better if I didn't touch it? It was sitting in a pile with compost for a year, and it was, some of those chunks got broken up. It was easier to handle. So that biology, I don't know that we'll ever know why we're putting biology with a nutrient that sits there so it's getting availability. We've never had availability. 95% of what we put Bio-sul on is in front of canola. The other 5 or 10% might be in front of peas. We haven't had any availability issues. The biology, I think, and we have spread elemental sulfur every single month of the year. I've spread Tiger in a foot of snow. Well, it wasn't best conditions, but the truck was there. He needed to haul grain. Went back in the spring, and all the little chocolate chips were sitting everywhere, and you touched it, and they disintegrated, and it was really, really cool. Like, an agronomy geek kind of gets his rocks off on that sort of thing. But I don't think... And Elston kind of helps me with a lot of things, but oxygen is not as, I believe, so the every acre, every year motto, I think, is absolutely true if you're putting it in the soil. No oxygen on a clay product. It takes time, but if you do it every single year, you're going to get availability of your sulfur. The Bio-sul, like, we always spread the Tiger a week minimum, usually 2 weeks ahead of the cedar, to get the oxygen, the weathering, the sun, the environment on it. And I don't think it's as critical with Bio-sul.
Do we have any questions from the audience, or where are we at for time there, Farah? 2 more minutes? Well, then I can't let any of these guys talk. It's like 30 seconds each.
We'll run over.
Well, I mean,
Any
that's
questions?
a lot, so I was going to give out some barbecue sauce. Okay,
Does sulfur make gin taste better?
yeah. From 2 to 5 ain't bad, but it's probably not enough.
Like, that gin is pretty damn good. I'd hate for it to be any better.
We got one question here. Anyone that want to ask a question? Burning question yet? Holy dude,
Holy
that's
moly.
a hand grenade.
Way more than 2 minutes.
Boom.
All right,
Tigger Elston.
so yes, we have, and in fact, that's one of the first places where we saw huge responses. But here's the key for the guys that have hayland. Oh boy, there's my daughter. She was 12 there. It's one of the four times in my life where a response was so rapid that it actually almost ran up and kicked you between the legs. And so you can see the check on the left and the NPK in the middle and Bio-sul to the right. That was taken literally like less than 3 weeks after the stuff was applied. Yields were dramatically increased. We had some experimental stuff in there, and we took 2 cuts that year. And so dramatic visual responses, dramatic yield responses, but guys and gals, this is the thing. You can't just put Bio-sul on a field of hay and expect those kind of responses. You got to balance the N and the P and the K and everything else with that sulfur. And here's the coolest part. Forages will respond in a linear fashion forever until they run out of water. So in other words, they will keep going up as long as the inputs match the water, and then when the water's done, the yield's done. Every other crop we grow, what does it do? It increases. If the inputs are increasing here, the yield goes like this, it peaks out, and then it declines. Only forages will keep going on a linear fashion forever if the nutrients are there in balance. And of course, water is one of the big nutrients. And that's what we saw here.
More nitrogen, more sulfur. Does anybody know why Agrium grows alfalfa on their 2 sections of land at Carsland? The agronomist at the time was called crazy, but he had a very simple answer. It uses the most nitrogen. So they're trying to get rid of all their spill water, which is rich in nitrogen. More sulfur, or more nitrogen, more sulfur, and grass has, you told me years ago, an unlimited response curve to nitrogen to a point where it runs out of water.
Yeah, just till you run out of water. So yeah, we've done lots of research on grass.
The soil column on this, part of this was organic, this organic. And it shows the soil column that I got really high.
A high shortage or a, really? Well, you need some elemental sulfur in your program, dude. That's the easy button.
We just did some organic land in Saskatchewan with Stuart McMillan, and we're going to watch that closely because there's something that happens when you actually apply sulfur on sulfur deficient land of any kind. It's visceral, whereas for a lot of people expecting some sort of sham wow, if you've had a really good sulfur program, you're not going to see magical results from this, but yeah, put it somewhere where it can come to life. It's pretty cool. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that little bit of overview from 3 of the masters in the Bio-sul Nation.